Okay, and hi Year 10 students. Welcome back. This is going to be our last video on our series on 12 Angry Men by Reginald Rose. And as we just left off, we sort of stopped in the middle of some evidence. We're mid-vote. We're at the start of page 60, and what's just happened, there's been a couple of pieces of evidence we've been discussing, that the jurors have been discussing, the psychiatrist evidence and the memory. Can you remember where you were, and the details of a movie under great emotional stress. And now we're about to go into the issue of the knife and how the stabbing happened. And so on page 60, the second juror brings up this business of the stab wound and how it was made, this downward angle, and he just doesn't, he's like, I'm not sure, something about it doesn't go right. The boy's 5'7" and the father's 6'2". That's 7 inches. It's awkward to stab down into the chest of someone who's more than half a foot taller than you are. And here's, I guess, an interesting thing. Juror 2 is really not one that's used very often. But remember, we're going to rely on our major jurors for our essay. So we're going to really heavily, everyone has to know juror 8, 10, 3, 9, 11 perhaps. But some of the minor jurors, if you can include alongside them, are really going to show that breadth of your knowledge. So they're going to distinguish you from people who can only discuss the 3 or 4 main characters, whereas if you can make a point and also include some of the minor jurors, they're going to actually help you to show examiners that you have more knowledge than just the stuff that everybody learns. So second juror, something you could think about is he begins as timid and hesitant, and some of those stage directions he kind of didn't know how to answer in the beginning, and yet here by the end he's actually taking on a much more active role in the deliberation. He's bringing up points of evidence, which shows, I guess, I'm questioning that, how could I use it? Well, even shy and reticent characters, such as juror 2, are able to participate meaningfully in the democratic process, in the judicial system, indicating Rose's view that each person, regardless of our personal experience, our personalities, our tendencies, ought to whatever we're able, participate responsibly in the democratic system. So something along those lines. Anyway, so they give a demonstration. So the third juror asks for a volunteer to demonstrate, and the 8th juror, remember that I said in the last video that these two are foils. They're like opposites, antithesis to each other. And here, the 2 of them, actually in the stage directions indicate it quite beautifully here, they have a physical representation of those conflicting views on the 2 different sides here, as the 3rd juror demonstrates how he would stab downwards. And he grabs the knife and he suddenly stabs downwards hard. Look out! And people, like the jurors, all react. The blade stops about an inch from the 8th juror's chest, but the 8th juror does not move. I love that. He is calm. He is unflappable. He does not reactive. He's unemotional. And so he says, look, that's how I'd stab him. Down and in. And, well, okay, down and in, they say. But then juror 5 pops up and actually takes a look at the knife, and he says, look, I've seen too many of them on my stoop in the backyard. It was in the neighborhood I lived. You forget about these things, But I wasn't thinking about it, but I guess you try and forget these things. You don't use this kind of knife that way. You have to hold it like this to release the blade. If you wanted to stab downwards, you would have to change your grip. Well, how do you use it? Underhanded. And so the 5th juror holds the knife open and swings it forward and upwards. Okay, like that. Anyone who's ever used a switch knife would never handle it any other way, he says. Are you sure? I'm sure, he says. Well, everyone agreed the boy's handy with a knife. Well, that's right. Well, do you think he would have made this wound? No, I don't think. Well, were you there? No, but neither was anyone else. Okay. And so at this point, they ask the 12th juror, well, what do you think? He is confused. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? What about you? To the 7th juror. And here the 7th juror says, well, I'm a little sick of this thing already. All this yakkin's getting us nowhere. I'm going to break it up here. I'm changing my vote to not guilty. So it's clear his reasons. His reason he's changing his vote is not because he now has reasonable doubt. It's because I'm sick of this whole thing. The yakkin's getting us nowhere. I'm going to break it up. So his motivation for changing his vote is clearly flawed. So even though he's now moved to what is the good side or the side of justice, which juror 8 represents, his reason for doing it is so flawed that this is also criticized by Rose as unsatisfactory. It's not the right way to behave in a democracy. Just change your vote because you're sick of it. Okay. And even juror 3 recognizes that. He's like, what? Just because you've had enough? Okay. And juror 11, I love this quote here, by the way. What? You've sat here and voted guilty with everyone else because there are some baseball tickets burning a hole in your pocket. All right. Now you've changed your vote because you're too sick of all the talking. You have no right to play with the man's life. This is a terrible and ugly thing to do. Some good quotes there too. Playing like this with somebody's life. If you want to vote not guilty, do it because you're convinced the man is not guilty, not because you've had enough. And if you think he's guilty, vote that way. Okay? So the 11th juror, again, represents Reginald Rose's authorial voice. It's a good phrase for you to use. So that's kind of a message that the author wants to say to all of us. Okay? Guilty or not guilty? And the 7th juror says, yep, I'm guilty. Well, I just don't think he's guilty. And the 11th juror looks disgustedly at him. And the 7th juror stands defeated. So they called for another vote. And here we go. I think this is the 5th vote. And at this point, we have 8 votes for not guilty, and then the foreman raises his own hand, and here now we have 9-3 in favor of not guilty. So we've got 9 not guilty and 3 guilty. So we just have the 3rd, 4th, and 10th juror who are voting guilty. And at this point, we see juror 10 embarks on a racist tirade. Could be a good phrase that you use. An extended racist tirade. And this couple of pages is full of abuse. You know what they're like. These people are born to lie. It's the way they are. No man is going to tell me otherwise. They don't know what the truth is. They are different. They think different. They act different. Okay? And so what you notice, we see the use of exclusive language. We see the bigoted views. We also see those techniques. So we have anaphora alongside something called epistrophe. So anaphora is a repetition at the start, they. Epistrophe is repetition at the end of a sentence or phrase. And here we've got both anaphora and epistrophe. They are different, they think different, they act different. So you could call it repetition, anaphora, or epistrophe. What it is, so if you were doing it though, we're not doing a language analysis. So it's not so much the technique that we're looking for, but it will help us to show the how Reginald Rose creates this meaning. What it is I would connect it with the absolute abhorrence of the racist views. So Reginald Rose, through juror 10's racist monologue invites the audience to criticize and condemn the intolerant views. And the views here through the anaphora and epistrophe, they are different, they think different. Sorry, they are different, they think different, they act different, reinforces the intolerance, bigotry, prejudice, and just how horrific these thoughts and ideas are. They're drunk and life don't mean as much to them as they do to you. Watch the stage directions. So we're invited to condemn, just like the jurors condemn. The 5th juror who slams the door, the 11th juror who crosses to the washroom, the 4th juror who moves to the window. And so physically, jurors one by one turn their backs on him, move away from him. They, with their body movement, body language, they show their condemnation. As juror 10 continues his racist monologue, they breed like animals. Notice the dehumanization there of the group of slum people. Do you know you're a sick man? I think that's a great quote that you can use. Sick. He's literally sick and metaphorically sick. Well, who are you to tell me that? Sick. Look at him. Can hardly stand up. And then the 12th juror says, well, maybe if you just quieten down. So they're all together uniting to condemn this voice of hatred. And he continues, they're multiplying 5 times as fast as we are. They're wild animals. They're going to breed us out of existence. Well, they're violent. They're vicious. They're ignorant. They will cut us up. This boy on trial, we've got him. This one at least. I say get him before his kind gets us. I don't give a goddamn about the law. You can see that personal desire to punish, the personal persecution of the defendant who represents the entire group. And I love the 2nd juror here. I've heard enough. Now you just stop all of this. So who started off as timid has now gained confidence. And then juror 4 tells him to sit down and don't open your filthy mouth again. And juror 4 and 10 come face to face, and then juror 10 turns away and sits with his back to the others. And the 8th juror, always calm, says, well, it's very hard to keep personal prejudice out of a thing like this. And no matter where you run into it, prejudice obscures the truth. And hopefully you can recognize the authorial voice of Reginald Rose there and the calm way he presents it also. We don't know what the truth is. We're gambling on probabilities. We may be wrong, but no one can know, but we have a reasonable doubt. And here is this beautiful moment where the authorial voice is, I think we have a reasonable doubt, and this is a safeguard that has enormous value in our system. And so it saves innocent people from going to jail, and it protects the judicial system from being corrupted, I guess. And so juror 4 is still holding on because of the testimony of the woman who actually saw the crime. And she saw him do it the wrong way. And so she saw it through the passing L train. And so they say that's unshakable testimony. Someone actually saw the killing. And given that, the 4th juror says, I don't see how we can vote for acquittal. Acquittal, when you acquit someone, you let them off. You say not guilty. And then at this point, juror 12 changes his vote. No, that's right. I'm changing my vote back to guilty. Okay. And here's the only juror to change his vote, to go one way, then the other. So he goes guilty, not guilty, guilty, and he's going to come back to not guilty again. And I think that changeable, the fact that he represents that world of commercialism, and I think it was somebody from my class the other day. I can't remember who it was. It may have been David Fuentes. I don't remember, but somebody from the class talked about the fact that he's gullible. He's swayed by the voices around him. So then he changes back again, in just the same way as we are swayed by the world of advertising. Perhaps there's something there, if it's not a stretch. But I thought it was really cool. And so we're back to 8-4, and they say they're hung jury. Let's come back over to page 68. Oh, bouncing around like a tennis ball is the 12th jury. Bounce, 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 bounce. And then I think this is the final piece of evidence, and it is the evidence of the eyeglasses or spectacles. Okay. And so juror 4 takes off his spectacles, some good stage directions here, lays his fingers over those marks and rubs the area over his nose. He says, look, he's kind of talking, but really the point is that the 9th juror has observed you're rubbing your nose like this. I think this is important. And why are you rubbing your nose? Well, it's because of my eyeglasses. They make these deep impressions on the side of your nose. But the woman who testified also had those same deep marks on the side of her nose, which brings into question the witness's reliability, her eyesight. And they say, look, they all kind of remember, most of them anyway, that she had those marks, and we don't know, page 70. Well, were they made by anything other than eyeglasses? Well, no, but nobody really thought of it before. And I love this line too. Perhaps it could be a pink one. There are 12 of us here concentrating on the case, but 11 of us didn't think it either. And I really thought, I've just written a little note that through Juror 8's comment here and through the fact that the combined efforts of the jurors brainstorming and deliberating and discussing together come to actually unpack the different pieces of evidence, it's really advocating that value of cooperation and teamwork, working together. And remember how the jury room represents society in a democracy. So for a democracy to work well, Rose is advocating the importance of collaboration, listening to one another, learning from one another in a really responsible way. And so, yes, he has the eyeglasses, but she says that she actually was sleeping at night and she looked out the window and happened to see the killing. So they say, look, it's logical to say she wasn't wearing them while she was trying to fall asleep, tossing and turning, because people don't wear eyeglasses to bed. And she probably didn't put her glasses on when she looked out the window. And so maybe she thought she saw the boy kill his father, but maybe she only saw a blur, says the 8th juror. The 3rd juror says, well, maybe she was farsighted. We don't know. Maybe she actually wears glasses because she needs to read, in which case she could see the boy just fine. But the woman's eyesight is in question now. We talked about this in class the other day, that, like, interestingly, if the lawyers did their job properly, all of this would have come out in court and it would be a very different jury discussion. But because they didn't get to discuss them, the jury room really are almost acting like lawyers trying to unpack the evidence. But anyway, then you can't send off a boy to someone to die on evidence like that. Is it possible the woman made a mistake? Remember that fallibility of eyewitness testimony. And they go, the 12th juror changes his vote again, not guilty. The 10th juror says, not guilty, do whatever you want. He says, I still think he's guilty, but I don't care, do whatever you want. And so he changes his vote to not guilty. 4th juror says, yes, I now have a reasonable doubt. It's 11-1. And the 3rd juror is the last one who is holding out. And then he goes through, what about all the other evidence? But you said we could throw out the other evidence. But what about every single thing in the courtroom? I mean, everything says he's guilty. And he goes back through all of that other evidence, kind of dismisses their objections to it and comes back. The others are silent. But we find out what his true motivation is in this last thing he says right at the bottom here, which is that whole thing about hearing the boy yell, the phrase was, "I'm going to kill you." That's what he said to his own father. I don't care what kind of man he was. It was his father, that goddamn rotten kid. I know him. Who's he talking about? He's talking about his own son. What they're like. More exclusive language, but this time they is kids. What they do to you, how they kill you every day. My God, don't you see? How come I'm the only one who sees? Geez, I can feel that knife going on. He has placed himself in the position of the accused dead father. And the juror 8 says, "It's not your boy. He's someone else. Let him live." "All right," he says, "not guilty." And then they take the verdict out. And the very final stage directions here has everyone leaves and only the 3rd and the 8th juror remain in the room. Juror 8 puts on his jacket and then brings juror 3's jacket to him. And juror 8 helps him on with his jacket. And I feel like there's got to be symbolism here. What could it represent? That there is some sort of mutual respect and camaraderie. I don't really finally they've done the right thing. A worthy adversary perhaps. But I feel like you could really do a lot of work. Perhaps pop into Google, what does this final jacket represents, and see what you find. But I definitely think that there is something that you could analyze there. And then the knife still sticks into the table, but the rain has stopped. And the curtain falls. And so that is the end of Reginald Rose's 12 Angry Men. Thanks so much for joining us. Good luck with your SACs, your assessment tasks, your essays, or whatever it is that you are doing. Thank you all.